Hello. So for my engineering honors capstone project, I worked in front-end design, specifically in the dog walking domain. And this project couldn't have been possible without the support of Professor Shanna Daly and her PhD candidate student, Shannon Clancy. I'm within mechanical engineering at the University of Michigan and excited to share my project with you. So the idea was that quite often in design projects, in courses at Michigan or anywhere else, you're forced to jump straight into coming up with ideas and solutions without sufficient time to develop your own research or to really understand the needs facing a demographic. So I wanted to take a moment to deep dive into front-end design, which is this analysis and research into the beginning of the design cycle in order to better inform the solutions and the quality of my work. So first I worked on defining a problem. So I came up with different demographics that I interacted with frequently or just observed. And then I identified any issues they were facing. And I found that a common one was that there are a lot of health issues related to a lack of exercise. So many people owning dogs, for example, you would think that they would be walking so much with their dog. However, they were not hitting the recommended 10,000 steps a day. And this has negative consequences on the whole community because then community health costs are higher, health standards are lower, and things of this nature. So my original problem was just, trying to come up with a way to increase the number of steps a regular dog walkers are taking per week. So I went about this in three main ways to try and find my information. Firstly, I did observations. The great thing about observations is you're able to find out information that people either forget to tell you, maybe don't think is relevant, or just you're able to observe them in their actual environment, that the situation's happening rather than opposite them in an interview situation. So I was able to find lots of information that I hadn't discovered previously just through traditional research. And I was able to see the interactions, for example, between different dog owners and things like that. So that was a great starting point. And then I moved on to interviews. So based on my observations, I had a few ideas of what would be the main challenges facing a given demographic. I didn't want to force these on anyone though. I wanted to confirm them without suggesting these. So in my interviews, I kind of asked around the question, didn't really suggest my thoughts, but was able to deep dive into three people's experiences on what their challenges were and able to kind of like verify my own or if I was on the right track. And then that enabled me to move on to surveys. So by the time I'd spoken to those three people, I had a good understanding of the challenges facing irregular dog walkers. But surveys enabled me to think, okay, is that just true of these three people or of everyone in this group? So it helps me remove that implicit bias and just kind of get an understanding of the whole community's thoughts. And on the right here are some of the dogs of the people that I surveyed. So synthesis is when I filtered, right? Because at this point I had so much information, all very high quality, but I had to choose a point to focus on in my project. So after I identified patterns and differences, I came up with a list of, some of the needs that were facing irregular dog walkers, so some of the issues they were encountering. And I put them through a couple of main filters. First, scientific research foundation. Was there anything out there that could verify this or information that could be used to guide my project? Was there existing designs out there? Was there something, is this already being solved? Would this have a large or a small impact on the stakeholder? So is this something that affects like only a tiny part of their walking or, the entire walk they're thinking about this problem? Then market size and competition is more, is this affecting just irregular dog walkers in this one location or the whole of the US? So really understanding the scale. And then fifth, I applied a mechanical engineering scope because that's my expertise. And I wanted to look into a problem that I could feasibly solve just to get the most out of this opportunity of going through this design process. So then I revised my problem statement to be really focusing on the reason, one specific reason that I passed all the filters in the previous page. The idea was that people quite often don't stop on a dog walk because they don't find it comfortable to stop, and then they end up taking a shorter walk. So instead of going on a long walk and taking a break, they find it uncomfortable to stop and they just take a shorter walk and get home. But obviously they're taking fewer steps, likely have worse health overall, and you can see where it goes from there. The idea was that I would design something that could work for a really large range of dog breeds and be convenient and accessible. So then I developed personas. Personas are great because they enable you, instead of just thinking, oh, I'm designing for all dog owners, you can really focus on, in my case too, a primary and a secondary. And so I created these two personas. And the idea was that I would check, okay, does this solution work for this person? Does this solution work for this person? And it just helps you really empathize a little bit stronger with specific individuals and check that by designing for everyone, you're not designing for no one, that specific people will actually find value from your solution. Next, I came up with stakeholder requirements and engineering specifications. So I had a good understanding of what I wanted my solution to be, portable, durable, reliable, affordable, all these great words. But what does that actually mean? How does that translate to a design? So I worked on creating quantifiable, measurable metrics that could inform my design. Things that, if these were achieved, then the stakeholder requirements would also be met. Next, I worked on ideating. So that included brainstorming, using a morph chart, analogical thinking, design heuristics cards, combining ideas. The whole point of this was just come up with as many ideas, as diverse ideas as possible. And some of them are over here on the right. So it went from anything from, like a typical, you're attaching the dog with a ring somewhere so you can stop comfortably, to, a collar that emits a sound when the dog strays a certain distance and then they come back to you, or some kind of like treat mechanism that keeps them close by, some cushion that you can help comfortably stop at. These aren't all fleshed out. It was just about coming up with as many ideas and really, pivoting and not fixating on one main idea. Then in the end, I ended up selecting this design. So the point of this project wasn't to deep dive into one design and fully flesh it out. It was to go through this whole process. But I selected a design that I thought best met all of the stakeholder requirements and everything I went over a few slides ago. So the idea is you would thread a dog lead. So the dog would be attached. You would thread the dog lead through this hole and then secure the dog lead on the left. And then it would be taut around a stationary object and the dog would be secure when they pull. I did a little bit of rudimentary prototyping here on the right, but it was more just to see, okay, how does this actually work, and go through the motions of the design cycle. So in reflection, it was very challenging to develop a solution for a broad range of dog breeds. So anything from a Chihuahua to a Great Dane was a little bit ambitious, just because of the adjustability aspect. It was also challenging to be in a remote project, because it made it challenging to interact with people and get out there, especially when I was doing this in France, which is not my native language. So it was challenging to interview people. And then, as always, I think with any project, it's hard to find people to respond to surveys and give accurate and representative information. But in the end, I got a really great understanding of the domain and all of the challenges associated with it. I came up with a really diverse range of concepts, and it was great to learn how to use those tools to do so. And I was able to do some prototyping on an idea. I think if I had more time, I would love to go further into developing that final solution and coming up with further prototypes. But I'm very happy with how it turned out. And I think it definitely informs my future projects, to make sure they're really based on, a solid understanding of who you're designing for, rather than just trying to fit your solution to any project. Yeah, thank you so much for listening.